Hello. Good morning. Um, how's it going? I am doing all right, I think, this week so far. Um, I've been trying to take more time lately to, just play around and try some new things, which has been pretty rewarding. Um, I am recording this right now on my normal software, but on Linux operating system that I'm dual booting on this computer, and that's been fun to be playing around with again. Um, I started using Linux when I was in high school, and I've used it, on and off for work and various other things, but I really enjoy, um, you know, seeing different new Linux distributions and stuff like that. So I've been playing around with Pop OS lately, and so far it's been really nice. So yeah, I'm trying to see if I can make this whole workflow for these videos on totally, free and open source software, because I think that would be a cool thing to do. Um, there are good, I think, practical and principled reasons for it, but I think for me, mostly it's just sort of an interesting thing to try for right now. Um, and uh, I think trying new stuff or trying stuff that feels like it has potential in the long term is important to do every once in a while. I think we all kind of know that on some level. Um, but I think it's hard sometimes when you're busy to make time to do that. So I think the other thing I've been trying to do is, give myself credit when I'm doing it, even a little bit. Um, One of the notes I wrote down to myself that I wanted to share now is, I've been thinking about this slow transformation of habits into new reality. Um, and I think, one thing we can do for each other to help each other out is to, encourage these small, slow transformations by having patience for each other and, being curious about little things, which I'm also trying to get better at. Um, and I think along with that, there's this matter of doing things just because. I do have high-minded reasons or whatever for wanting to use open source software, for example, but it's also just interesting to, mess around with. Um, and I think it's important to mess around with stuff. I've been thinking and talking a lot with people that I know, IRL, about tinkering for a while. But I think the importance of tinkering truly, truly, truly cannot be understated. Because, you know, life is a big experiment that only gets run once. And, it's very complicated, as you may have noticed. Uh, and, I think a lot of us get stuck kind of in a little bit of a trap. We think about the things that are most likely to happen and most likely to work, or that seem the most obvious at any given time. And sometimes we have to, like there's some, very obvious reason why it's important to, um, do something right away. But I think it can leave you stuck feeling like, life is very obvious and planned out, and um, there's nothing really to be explored. And it's just not true. Because I think if we, any of us, search our memory or tell ourselves a story about like how we got, you know, from one point in life to another, there's often, surprising connections that, make certain things possible. But that, we didn't plan out, right? So I think doing small things and tinkering around and just pulling at little threads and seeing what happens is just such an important part of everyday existence. And it's fun. It's fun. Another thing that's been a big part of my day to day in the past couple of years, I've been shooting a lot of film photography, full manual camera that my late father gave to me when I was in high school. So I've had it and been shooting it for a very long time, but getting back into it. And I have been really enjoying the process of just taking pictures and focusing on the act of taking pictures for no other reason than just to do it, to try and capture interesting moments. And it's funny because I use the pictures for some stuff. I use them for these videos. But, I also have a lot of thoughts to myself while I'm, standing around focusing on framing a scene really intently. I have a lot of interesting conversations. People will, see this old camera and come up and start asking me questions. A lot of times it's people who are older and are familiar with the camera, or just surprised to see one out and about in the world, and it's really nice. And one of the things that I've been thinking about that's really stuck with me lately is I love that photos, taking a photo, in some ways it's a more involved process than just taking out my camera phone and shooting a picture, especially for something that I maybe think is interesting in the moment. But because it's a little bit more involved, it just kind of gets you into a different mode of thinking. I'm picking a scene that I want to wait to see and that I want to preserve for some conscious reason. And it's kind of interesting. And the other thing that's neat is there's no post-processing really. I mean, I can edit the photos when I scan them, obviously, but I'm very attracted to this way where, you snap the picture, the shutter opens, light comes into the camera, it reacts with the film, and that's it, and obviously development also affects the photo, but I think it's cool that the process of recording happens kind of all at once in this very particular way. And I think it gives an interesting quality to the photos themselves. And I'm an optics nerd also at heart. So, I really love the ways that the optics also affect, the actual image and background blur and all of these sorts of things. So yeah, I don't know. I think it's been a useful exercise to me to keep my mind open to like these kinds of things and these kinds of scenes. And it's been a nice process, you know? Yeah. And doing all of this in this place at this time has been interesting because I really do think we are all kind of conditioning each other into different ideas of normal, and in some ways I feel like being in a place, being in a city, being in a state, being in a country, it's kind of like being in a a psychological flock almost, because we're all abiding by each other's expectations of what's normal or acceptable experimentation, and I just think, at least in my experience, I think most of the places I find myself, it's like we could stand to do a little bit more experimentation just as a treat from time to time. So I'm hoping to kind of, maybe change the world around me a little bit just by putting myself out there and trying new things myself. And I'm having fun with it. So there's that. And last but not least, I think I wanted to share something amusing from the last few weeks. So, maybe you have noticed in some other places, I think I've used this on social media when I repost these videos. But sometimes I've been referring to these posts as blogs. And for me, that's a combination of picture and blog, because this is not a video blog. I mean, there's one frame of image just repeated over and over again. And it's not text. So it's like, I'll call it a blog. And it was days after I used that term online somewhere that I had the thought of like, oh my God, I hope that's not some kind of, I don't know, terrible slang word for something. So, and I hadn't Googled it. I hadn't so much as Googled it, which is supremely unwise. But I did Google it, and I found that it's a very charming slang term in Swedish for, going jogging and picking up trash, bringing a trash bag with you to pick up your trash, plogging. And there are similar terms for doing that while biking or hiking in Swedish as well. And I was like, oh, well, I don't want to steal the thunder of such a noble enterprise, but I am happy to share it. I don't think blogging is necessarily at risk of becoming a massive YouTube trend, but if it does, it will have to contend with the existing form of blogging. Anyway, I hope wherever you are when you're listening to this, you're blogging along in some fashion, whether it's journaling yourself or going out and picking up refuse, or maybe just trying new things, trying to change the world around you by doing new things from time to time. Every little bit helps, I think. So thank you for listening, and have a great day. Talk to you again eventually. Blog on.